Hi, everyone. I am Sandra Wortham, and this is my YouTube channel. For anyone who's watching for the first time, first of all, thank you for watching. Here at this channel, we talk about public safety. Specifically, we talk about how you and I and everyone else, just everyday people who aren't necessarily involved in the legal system or the law enforcement world, but are just people living in life who want to be alive and safe, how we can harness our information and our power as citizens to really demand the types of communities we want to live in, demand safe communities. So that's what we talk about here in a variety of different ways. So thank you for joining. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Today, I really would like to just address some basics that seem kind of elementary, but I think we need to really focus on because they are the bread and butter of how we can demand change. And so there's going to be a this video and then probably a subsequent maybe 2 or 3 videos just to make sure these don't get too long and that we're kind of pointed. So this one, we're really just going to talk about the players in the criminal justice system and how ultimately we are responsible for all of them. So I think a lot of times when I hear people talk about um, bad acts of violence, like when something terrible happens in the community, and sometimes I'll hear people say, like, how could this happen? And I'm always like a little confused because to me, it's like, oh, it's very kind of clear how it happened. Because generally, when you see a really pretty much any act of violence, but when you see a particularly egregious act of violence, you can very often trace that act of violence, not necessarily specifically, but the creation of the environment that allowed for it to be, you can trace that back to a policy. So when we talk about policies, sometimes they're organizational policies and sometimes they're actual law, be that state, federal, or municipal law. But ultimately, these are things created by humans in policy making positions. And so I really want to talk about all of the players kind of in the public safety ecosystem, for lack of a better phrase, how they get there, and how ultimately it's up to us. So, first, let's start with the very basic point that generally people in policy making positions are either elected or appointed. So obviously if a person is elected, we vote for that person, and that person, if they get the most votes, then becomes that person in the position. um, Often once a person is elected to a position, they will make key appointments to policy making positions. So when they make these appointments, often that person being appointed doesn't have to be presented to the citizenry, right? The electorate to say, hey, do you want this person in this key position? No, the person you just elected decides that's the person they want and they put the person there. Um, but the point of this is that everybody, even those appointed people, can be traced back to the decisions we make as voters, and who we put in these positions. And of course, there are staff members in every organization, right? So I'm not necessarily talking about them. I'm talking about the people whose names we know, the people whose names are on the letterhead, the people who are in the top positions to really drive the policy positions and the direction of offices and of public safety entities. So, given that, we'll end this video by just highlighting the what did I say, 4 or 5 major entities, and then we'll do a subsequent couple of videos just to break down how those people get there. So first, when we talk about public safety, obviously we talk about the police. In some places, I don't know, the top law enforcement person is called a sheriff. Here in Chicago, and I said this in the introductory video, I'm from Chicago, I live in Chicago, so a great deal of this will be from a Chicago lens, but it's really applicable to wherever you live in the country because a lot of these themes are consistent. So you obviously got the police as your law enforcement officials out there actually enforcing the law. Then you have prosecutors who are the lawyers who, you know, pursue the cases against alleged offenders. And again, this channel, we're talking about violent crime for the most part, okay? Then, of course, you have judges who make the decisions when cases are brought. They make the decisions while the cases are being kind of worked out. And then, as you all know, even if you don't practice or you're not necessarily involved in the law, but we all watch Law and Order, I presume. That sometimes cases go before a jury, sometimes cases go before a judge, but judges have a great deal of power, as do prosecutors. And then this is the one that we're going to spend quite a bit of time on in another video, but that people I think leave out a lot: legislators. Okay, so we have legislative bodies at the municipal, so it could be your city level. We have legislative bodies at the state level, and we have legislative bodies at the federal level. These people are very important to the public safety ecosystem, but unfortunately, we don't necessarily hear about their role as much because it's often done, at city council or in the state capital, which is, like our state capital in Illinois is in Springfield. It's about 3 hours away from Chicago. So unless you just have a lot of free time, or you work in government, or you work in policy, you're probably not down there listening to what they're doing every day. And so that's why I just think this is so important for us to create spaces to have this conversation, because they are the ones who are passing law that is then enforced by police, that is then the guiding the guiding law when prosecutors say, okay, what can be charged here, what constitutes a crime. It's your state legislators often, and we're talking about state court right now, but it's your state legislators who are actually like voting on those laws. And so we have to really talk about how we can make sure we know what they are doing. So police, prosecutors, judges, state legislators. I'm going to do a subsequent video for each one and then break down kind of the elected versus appointed dynamics for each of those players and how ultimately we're in charge. And so it's really up to us. If we don't like what's happening, if we think there are unacceptable levels of violent crime, which I do, then it's up to us to make sure we've got the right people in the right positions to press the right policy to allow us to live safely as we deserve. So I'll see you on the next video. Thank you very much.